Howdy guys, Attorney Walter Knott. We're going to have a really big video tonight, and I just wanted to go ahead and give you guys a quick heads up as to what's going to be going on. We're going to be bringing back basically a security expert to give us an update that has intel information that I can't get access to, but they can. So they're going to be able to update you specifically on the Ukraine situation. And also, very importantly, things are starting to heat up in the world of the SSI Restoration Act, Social Security 2100 Act, because President Biden has now returned back to the identity of addressing the issues relating to essentially what's going on with mental health illness, impairments, things like that in the national economy. So let's get rolling right into this. I'm starting a little bit late. The dogs are destroying the place. Let's get right into it. Okay, here we go. What are they doing? All right, here we go. Fact sheet. Straight from the White House. President Biden to announce strategy to address our national mental health crisis as part of Unity Agenda, his first State of the Union. Let's go through this. This was published on the White House website, March 1st, 2022, statements and releases. Here we go. And his first State of the Union, and just to give you guys a heads up, this was published on March 1st. On March 1st, President Biden had been in for 1 year, 1 month, and 12 days. Again, 1 year, 1 month, 12 days. Here we go. In his first State of the Union, the president will outline a unity agenda consisting of policy where there has historically been support from both houses, Republicans and Democrats, and call on Congress to send bills to his desk to deliver progress for the American people. As part of this unity agenda, he will announce a strategy to address our national mental health crisis. Mental health crisis. That's the baseline for the entire thing here. Here we go. Our country faces an unprecedented mental health crisis among people of all ages. 2 out of 5 adults report symptoms of anxiety or depression, and Black and brown communities are disproportionately undertreated, even as the burden of mental illness has continued to rise. Even before the pandemic, rates of depression and anxiety were inching higher, but the grief, trauma, and physical isolation of the last 2 years have driven Americans to a breaking point. So, one of the things to acknowledge here, he's addressing right up front mental impairments, mental illness, not physical impairments. Okay, so we're going to read through this. I'll keep giving you guys updates as to the summary. Next paragraph. Our youth have been particularly impacted as losses from COVID and disruptions in routines and relationships have led to increases with increased social isolation, anxiety, and learning loss. More than half of parents express concern over their children's mental well-being, as early studies have found that students are about 5 months behind in math and 4 months behind in reading compared with students prior to the pandemic. So in summary, addressing the child situation, kids are getting up onto the curve of being where they're supposed to be. Obviously, as you know, Americans not really that high compared with other countries as to their academia system for educating children, but that's okay. Let's keep reading. Here we go. In 2019, 1 in 3 high school students and half of female students reported persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness, an overall increase of 40% from 2009. Emergency department visits for attempted suicide have risen, and this is the big one. This is the big one right here. Emergency department visits for attempted suicide have risen 51% among adolescent girls. So one of the things that I think is interesting is that this is not traditionally a write-up you would see posted to a presidential website prior to essentially an address to his union, which is the United States of America. So this is good. We're getting some coverage here. We're getting some movement here from the White House, which of course is the thing that begins the progress for getting Congress to push forward bills that we want to get passed. SSI Restoration Act, Social Security 2100 Act, etc. Let's keep reading. This youth mental health crisis has been accentuated by large social media platforms, which for years have been conducting a national experiment on our children and using their data to keep them clicking with enormous consequences. Now, I would have never thought, because, remember, he just shot a lot of these mega, groups that are, your Googles, your Facebooks, your Twitters, your yada yada, in the kneecaps. I would have never thought President Biden would have, the chutzpah to go ahead and go after these groups, especially when the Democrats received, like $400 million plus from Facebook alone with the last big election. So it's almost astounding to see him calling out these mega social media websites and saying, and I quote here, conducting a national experiment on our children and using their data to keep them clicking with enormous consequences. While technology platforms have improved our lives in some ways, there's mounting evidence that social media is harmful to many kids and teens' mental health, well-being, and development. As the Surgeon General has said, when not deployed responsibly and safely, these tools can pit us against each other, reinforce negative behaviors like bullying and exclusion, and undermine the safe and supportive environment young people need and deserve. Interesting. I would have never expected him to come out with this. As President Biden, I would have never expected that. I would have expected him fully supporting social media platforms. He gets major, funding from these groups. So I would have personally expected him to never touch on this. State of the Union, the president will call on Congress to strengthen privacy protections, ban targeted advertising to children, and demand technology companies stop collecting personal data on our children. As you know, the main player for stopping a lot of that data collection was Apple computers. So, and I know there's a lot of people calling me. I can on the phone. We will get to you. No worries. President Biden is laying out a vision to transform how mental health is understood, perceived, accessed, treated, and integrated in and out of healthcare settings. The American Rescue Plan laid the groundwork, providing critical investments to expand access to mental health services. Now far more is needed to ensure that everyone who needs help can access care when and where they seek it. I think that's a bit over. I think he lunged a little bit too far with the, with the poll that he was shooting from there, because to be honest with you, that healthcare plan, the American Rescue Plan that he's talking about, really, it didn't have a solid foundation to stand on when it comes to attaching to, fixing, etc., mental health issues. So I don't think he's being very fair there. I think he's got a big problem there. And remember, with these State of the Union situations, a lot of it's boasting. It's their ego, what I could do, what I potentially, etc. This is his wish list going forward, even though, keep in mind, there hasn't been a budget for it. So, there's a problem there. All right. The president is announcing a national mental health strategy to strengthen system capacity, connect more Americans to care, and create a continuum of support, transforming our health and social services infrastructure to address mental health holistically and equitably. That entire paragraph was shenanigans and fluff. Let me read it to you again. It's shenanigans and fluff, okay? At any point in that paragraph, I want you to tell me exactly what the plan is. If you can tell me exactly what the plan is, then it's not shenanigans and fluff. Ready? The president is announcing a national mental health strategy to strengthen system capacity, connect more Americans to care, and create a continuum of support, transform our health and social services infrastructure to address mental health holistically and equitably. That is what I like to call BS DC chatter. That's politicians throwing words at you to make it sound sweet and smooth, like some southern, sweet tea drink or a piece of pie, so your ears just open up to whatever's going to come next. This is what you would expect in one of those like TV, religious kind of like, I'm promoting this, donate here, donate here. This is what that reminds me of. It doesn't give you a clear and definitive answer as to how he's going to fix this mental health problem. Let's keep reading. Strengthen system capacity. Here's where he's going to address bullet point number 1. At the center of our national mental health crisis is a severe shortage of behavioral health providers. More than 1/3 of Americans live in designated mental health professional shortage areas, communities that have fewer mental health providers than the minimum their level of population would need. Even outside of these shortage areas, the fragmentation of the current system makes it hard for mental health providers to meet people where they are. We must dramatically expand the supply, diversity, and cultural competency of our mental health and substance use disorder workforce, from psychiatrists to psychologists, peers to paraprofessionals, and increase both opportunity and incentive for them to practice in areas of highest need. Our crisis response infrastructure must also be strengthened to ensure that those facing acute behavioral health challenges can be seamlessly connected to necessary services. We will. Here's where he goes through the thing. My assessment of this paragraph is that he said one thing that was truly important, which is that there is not enough people to go ahead and handle the proper treatment of individuals that have mental health issues geographically based on population. Very true. Good point. That's shadow attacking Sweetie, because Sweetie probably is trying to get some food out of him. Now, with that said, I want to make something very clear. In all of this, social media could be used for mental health purposes, which is something I more expected him to argue on behalf of. I expected President Biden to push the agenda of saying, hey, why don't we have online psychologists, online mental review physicians to go ahead and look at these situations, create helpful videos that will get people to go ahead and, become a better suited individual for the society that they live in nowadays. It could be used in that way. That's what I expected from him. Instead, He's actually going after social media, which I didn't think that was going to happen. All right. We will, that's what he says, invest in proven programs that bring providers into behavioral health. The president's FY23 budget. Now, remember how I said there was no budget for this in 2022? Like, if you wanted to see, the Supplemental Security Income 21 or the Supplemental Security SSI Restoration Act or the Social Security 2100 Act passing, he probably wouldn't do it until 2030 or 2023 because the budget wasn't put in place. He just didn't have that motion going. He didn't push that agenda. That's what's going on here. Okay, he's saying basically for 2023, so not this year, we're not taking care of mental health this year, but for 2023, basically the agenda will be essentially to push forward the budget for the president to assist those with mental health issues in 2023 more than anything. All right, let's keep rolling. Okay, so let's see. We will invest $700 million in programs like the National Health Service Corps, Behavioral Health Workforce Education and Training Program, and the Minority Fellowship Program that provide training, access to scholarships, and loan repayment to mental health and substance use disorder clinicians committed to practicing in rural and other underserved communities. These major new investments will both expand the pipeline of behavioral health providers and improve their geographic distribution to target areas with the greatest unmet need. Okay, now let's talk about the big thing here, which is that he's missing the main focal point of why a lot of these mental health issues tend to pop up. And that is that our economy is shit. It's totally drowning. We don't have enough money. The average human being does not have enough money to not only basically flourish in America, but also they don't have enough money to even survive. It's gotten to the point where people are barely living on food stamps. We are at the point where food stamps can't afford the cost and living increase. That's how bad it is. So this is good to throw a lot of money at professionals to go ahead and treat people, but it's also not addressing the number one issue, which is making sure they have funding to not be abused because they have to go ahead and rent some place from somebody that's going to abuse them, to go ahead and get clean water, enough food to eat throughout the month. These are more important, in my opinion, than basically saying we need to put $700 million towards National Health Service individuals to treat them. If we don't fund these people more to be able to afford food, afford housing, otherwise a lot of them just live in this constant, repetitive, having to live with somebody they hate, having to put up with somebody who's abusing them. It's just this repetitive cycle. A lot of you guys, if you sit back and say to yourself, maybe this, maybe all these, maybe we can have a bunch of people with anxiety, right? And then these people with anxiety can then be treated by this $700 million worth of workforce and mental health that we'll create. Or we could just make sure people have enough money so that they don't have anxiety from their living costs, which is one of the most, if not the most major thing that people suffer from in America. Not being able to live, food, water, fuel, housing is the number one thing that causes anxiety. Sure, there's many other things that cause anxiety. Prior abuse, interacting with people, interacting with, basically a situation where you're enclosed to, you're in enclosed spaces and things like that. You become anxious. Sure. But the number one thing consistently is not enough food, not enough shelter, not enough clean basic resources. Okay. Let's keep reading. Pilot new approaches to train a diverse group of paraprofessionals. Doctors, so we're talking about putting lots of money into creating professionals to treat the mental impairments, as opposed to giving people more money to help decrease the amount of people that are essentially anxious, which means that we wouldn't need as many, professionals. Doctors, nurses, and other clinicians cannot do this work alone. In the fall of 2022, HHS expects to award over $225 million in training programs to increase the number of community health workers and other health support workers providing services, including behavioral health support in underserved communities. The president's FY 23 budget, 2023 again, will also propose major new multi-year funding to develop provider capacity and support mental health transformation. He's going to build a national certification program for peer specialists. The Biden-Harris administration will convene stakeholders, launch development, and support implementation of a national certified peer specialist certification program, which will accelerate universal adoption, recognition, and integration of the peer mental health workforce across all elements of the healthcare system. Here's the problem with this, guys. It's great. Let's create a massive system where we can employ a lot of people. That's great. But we're still not addressing the number one problem, which is lack of money. That's the number one problem. That's it. That's the number one problem. If people don't have enough money, they're going to have depression, they're going to have anxiety, they're going to have panic attacks, they're going to have schizoaffective based, functional aspects of their life which just go off the rails. It is a lack of money problem before all others. Now, after the lack of money problem, sure, we need lots of professionals to service those who are having issues beyond just, I don't have money to be able to survive. Sure, but we wouldn't need nearly as many. Here's the next part. Promote the mental well-being of frontline health workforce. 3/4 of frontline healthcare workers report burnout, while more than half say they lack adequate supports to cope. The administration has already dedicated $103 million in American Rescue Plan funding to address burnout and strengthen resiliency among healthcare workers. The president will strengthen this commitment by signing the bipartisan Dr. Lorna Breen Healthcare Provider Protection Act into law, which will invest $135 million over 3 years into training healthcare providers on suicide prevention and behavioral health, while launching an awareness campaign to address stigmatization, promote health seeking and self-care among this workforce. So what he's saying is he's got to throw $100 million plus another $135 million to try and make sure that our healthcare workers aren't overworked. Or what you could do is just go ahead and make sure they have enough wages and proper hours. That could be it, because a lot of these healthcare workers have to work with people well beyond their 9 to 5, constantly on call. Somebody calls them, I want to commit suicide. They're on call all the time. Maybe just hang in with me on this one. Maybe what he could do is go ahead and basically create a system where those individuals get better pay and just hear me out, and they have more people who are basically taking over during the night shift, as opposed to all these individuals having difficulty calling and saying, well, the office is closed right now. There's a lot of things here that could be fixed, and I get it. He's the president. His thing is how much money I'm going to throw at the problem. That's what presidents are for. It's, general executive management. They're going to look at the problem from up here and throw money at the problems as need be. And then they'll have some sort of executive layout with the plan attached to it that equates to what they want to do to go ahead and fix the problem. Thank you, good sir, for the $5 donation. Start thinking of it as our paper money. There you go. They are indeed. All right, next thing here. In addition, HHS will continue to grant programs to support healthcare systems and provider groups to prevent burnout, relieve workplace stressors, administer stress first aid, and increase access to high-quality mental health care for the frontline healthcare workers. Now, one thing he does not mention here that's super important to understand is the following. Here's what you need to know. Number one, when you work constantly around people who are highly depressed, when you work constantly around people who are having issues, mental issues, they weigh on you no matter what. A lot of you guys always ask me, how am I doing? I'm always doing okay because I have a somewhat, good resilience to that. But I know other people, they get home after working with people with mental impairments and they're very upset. They don't want to be around anybody. They're very miserable. And then they wake up, rinse and repeat. They smile throughout the day and then they go home and they're very unhappy. That is because that type of job pulls significantly on people. And that's good, but they don't mention that here. I think they should. Thank you, Madame. Shirley, I really, really appreciate it. They're right now eating treats over there. Indeed. I think I put out treats from them over there and they just grabbed them all. And now they're not battling anymore, so they should be good. Thank you for the donation. I really, really appreciate it. So here's the next thing on here, and this is super important. Launch the 988 crisis response line and strengthen community-based crisis response. This summer, HHS will launch the 988 mental health crisis service hotline. So there's like 911, now there's 988, but this will be for mental, which will create a national network of local crisis centers fortified by national backup centers to answer calls and texts. Through the American Rescue Plan, the administration has provided $180 million to support local capacity to answer crisis calls and establish more community-based mobile crisis response and crisis stabilization facilities to minimize unnecessary emergency department visits. That's a big thing. They're creating their own mental health system that's going to have its own 988 instead of a 911. That's a big thing. That's like creating Space Force. That's how big that is. The president's FY23 budget will build on the investment with an additional nearly $700 million to staff up and shore up local crisis centers while also building out the broader crisis care continuum. Someone to call, someone to respond, and somewhere for every American in crisis to go. This is probably his best thing right here, because the idea is to create a platform for people to go to in a crisis situation. If somebody needs a place to stay for a couple of days, that situation. However, one thing that has to be brought up is that much crisis that exists in America is a result of drug abuse and drug use and all of those things related to narcotics, which then creates a situation where people have to repetitively go through this. They go from one place to the next. They get a dual diagnosis at a facility, which means they have a physical or mental impairment plus some sort of addiction. And then they go through this repetitive cycle over and over where they can never really make it out of that to go have a job, or they have to wait until basically a disability attorney goes ahead and wins their benefits and gets them through the process. That's kind of where the whole system works right now. How will this change this? It'll add another, let's call it facility, another existence, right? Before you had to use hospitals that bought a bunch of motels, converted them into basically, housing shelters, or having local homeless help facilities, or coalitions for the homeless, etc., or Samaritan facilities. You had to use those. This will add a federal level version of that, which is very good. But we're going to see that there's going to be some interaction problems, especially with drug abuse, just like it has with all the other programs. Expand the availability of evidence-based community mental health services. The American Rescue Plan invested millions of dollars to expand certified community behavioral health clinics. And remember, we're still waiting for all this stuff to actually push through, and we're going to see whether or not this money is spent on that. There's always that I threw this many millions at it, but whether or not it gets to that, whether or not it creates something, you guys wouldn't believe how many billions have gone through Congress that didn't end up where they were supposed to. A proven model of care that has been shown to improve health outcome while lowering costs by delivering 24/7 mental health and substance use care to millions of Americans, no matter who they are or whether they're able to pay. Now, what this is, Karen McConnell, thank you. Karen McConnell, thank you for donating the $10. I really appreciate it. Wow, thank you. So here's what you need to know about this real quick. What Biden is starting to create is a version of like Medicaid for mental health related individuals, like a new health network at the federal level, which is good. That's good. Maybe one day we'll all have Medicare and this will tie into it. Maybe that would be great. But the reality is that's what he's creating here. A future design essentially for having mental impairments be able to be treated, which then brings us into the forefront of why don't they just put this money into giving Medicare for all? Okay, so let's keep rolling with this thing. The president's 2023 budget will build on this down payment by proposing to make this program permanent while granting states funding to expand CCBHCs for the community that need them the most, and that's the Certified Community Behavioral Health Clinics. Okay. The president's budget will also permanently extend funding for community mental health centers, which provide essential mental health services to vulnerable communities that would otherwise lack access. Invest in research on new practice models, new scientific and technological innovations has the opportunity to expand our capacity to meet Americans' mental health needs, but there is a pressing need for research to validate what works and build a robust evidence base. The president's 2023 budget will call for investing $5 million in research into promising models for treating mental health conditions. Now, let's be honest here, guys. $5 million in essentially mental health investigation is not going to do anything. It's very, very small. It might lead to something, who knows, but you need significantly more amounts of funds than $5 million to go into research for the mental health issues. And remember, what this all ends up going into is just big pharma going ahead, creating drugs to then, sell to these insurance companies to then give to these people who need them to go ahead and continue forward. And then, of course, people always argue, well, it turns me into a zombie, so I don't want to take it. And then, of course, people always argue, I don't want to have to take it, and therefore I'm acting out, and therefore it's acceptable because I don't want to have to take it, and yada, yada, yada. And then we get into this back and forth, and then the police get involved. And then with the timeline, how it works, then that person continuously goes to a mental health facility. Then about 10 to 15 of those later, basically that person who has mental health problems who won't take their medication ends up at the local jail. Then the jail goes to the prison, and then we basically have a system that failed the person, that cost a lot to fail the person. Connect Americans to care. Less than half of Americans with mental health conditions receive treatment. The average delay from the onset of mental health symptoms to treatment is 11 years. Too often costs prevent people from accessing care far. I don't know why they didn't complete that. At the same time, those with mental illness are often misunderstood, mistreated, mislabeled, and misdirected to services. It is imperative that we promote better pathways to care and make it as easy as possible for all Americans with behavioral health needs, including common and pervasive conditions like anxiety and depression, to access the resources that will improve their well-being. We must fight to ensure that every American can access, right, mental health and substance use disorder care through their insurance coverage, while integrating mental health services and supports into a variety of other settings online and in the community. All right, you notice how they just barely mention, the whole, in this executive, update, this summary, the whole, substance use disorder. One of the things that we at some point have to be more aggressive towards, not so much the drug user, because I mean, they're hooked. It is what it is. They're a slave to drugs. There's no way around that. Just, we can keep punishing them, but it's not going to happen. But what we do need to start punishing are going after those who are distributing drugs. I'm talking long-term jail sentences. Because if people run out of people to buy from, and oh, no, there's always going to be drugs. No, there's not. If you arrest the 20 drug dealers in a city, you're running low on drug dealers. And that's a good thing. And let me tell you why that is. The entire generation above the millennials, below the millennials, an entire generation has been lost to drugs as a result of them turning people into basically zombies that need to have it. And they'll tell you to your face, they'll just line up with you, they'll square their shoulders up to you that they are not a drug abuser, that they have their life in control. And they will tell you this with sincerity in their heart because they believe it, because they BS themselves. But the reality is, the number one thing that destroys more American families and more American lives, potential for education, building great things, doing great things with one's life, it's drugs. It's drugs. It's not cancer. It's not bullets. It's not cars. It's drugs. Here we go. Biden-Harris administration will expand on and strengthen parity. The 2008 Mental Health Parity and Addiction Equity Act called for mental health care benefits to be covered at the same level as physical health care benefits. The President's fiscal 2023 budget will propose that all health plan cares cover robust behavioral health services with an adequate network of providers, including 3 behavioral health visits each year without cost sharing. Integrate mental health and substance use treatment into primary care settings. Here we go. Equipping primary care providers with the tools to identify, treat, and manage behavioral health conditions is a proven approach for delivering quality mental health and substance use care, particularly for individuals with depression. To facilitate adoption of these models, the President's 2023 budget will double funding for primary and behavioral health integration programs. In addition, using existing authority, the Department of Health and Human Services will test payment models that support the delivery of whole person care through behavioral health integration and authorize Medicaid reimbursement of interprofessional consultations so that the primary care providers can consult with a specialist and provide needed care for patients. Wow, Mark Dunn, thank you so much. Mark Dunn donated $10. You're a true patient. We need more people like you, yourself. I watch every video you make, every one of them. You are straightforward and truthful. Thank you, sir. Well, thank you, good sir. I appreciate it. That's excellent. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you, good sir. That's $10 donation right there. I really appreciate it. So, guys, thank you for all your donations. I really, really appreciate them. I know that some of this stuff is boring when I read it to you, and I get that. But at the same time, this is the shaping of the future of what's going to happen with disability benefits and health insurance going forward. It's not the B2B, we're promising you a fourth stimulus tomorrow crap. It's none of that. That at this point is like fraud beyond imagination. This is purely what's actually happening in Congress going forward. All right, so let's go through this. Improve veterans' access to the same-day mental health care. Veterans are at a higher risk for mental health and substance use challenges than the general population. So are judges. That's a fact you guys should check out, and it's a very, very true one. Increasing their access to quality mental health care is the first step to closing this disparity. The Department of Veterans Affairs will reduce barriers to mental health access by fully implementing their primary care mental health integration and behavioral health interdisciplinary programs, which connect veterans to same-day mental health care and improve the integration of these services into primary care settings. All right. If I've not read enough, you guys should have a consistent feeling that what they're doing is throwing a lot of money into creating systems that are addressing mental health when we could just get Medicare for all people. We could do that. We could still increase the workforce, right? Because now we have more people with access to medical treatment. People are going to be healthier, likely catching things sooner. They're going to be treated. If we could just skip all of this jazz and go straight to healthcare for all, Medicare for all, and skip this and just hire more people and create programs within this Medicare for all thing, we would actually get to skip this whole ruinous experience of trying to like manipulate this thing here to bolster this thing here to help this thing here. This is a baby step when we could just fix the problem. But that's politics. Never forget, politicians exist to fix one thing only slightly, because if the whole thing was fixed, we wouldn't need them. Next thing, expand access to tele and virtual mental health care options. The use of telehealth to address mental health and substance use needs rose dramatically during the height of the pandemic and has remained above pre-pandemic levels even where COVID has waned. These telemental health services have proven both safe and effective while reducing barriers to care to maintain continuity of access. The administration will work with Congress to ensure coverage of behavioral health across health plans and support appropriate delivery of telemedicine across state lines. At the same time, now that's a big thing, telehealth across state lines, not just being set up in a particular state to practice medicine, but telehealth across state lines. Now, of course, you're going to end up with one massive telehealth, facility that's mega funded that then has everybody calling in. You're going to end up with the Lowe's, the Home Depot, the Morgan & Morgan kind of esque giant big box, mental health facility. And yes, the quality, the customization will be reduced as a result of that. But that's where that goes. When you get things where state lines are opened, you always end up with mega corporations taking over the entire industry. Okay, at the same time, HHS will create a learning collaborative with state insurance departments to identify and address state-based barriers like telehealth limitations to behavioral health access. And the United States Office of Personnel Management will facilitate widespread, confidential, and easy access to telehealth services, in part by strongly encouraging federal employees' health benefit programs. By strongly encouraging federal employees' health benefit program carriers to sufficiently reimburse providers for telehealth services and to eliminate or reduce co-payments for consumers seeking telemental health service. That's nice. We're going to now go ahead and try to eliminate or reduce co-payments for consumers seeking telemental health service. Or we could just make Medicare for all, or we could just do that, and skip all this shenanigans, right? And just do Medicare for all. Expand access to mental health support in schools and colleges and universities. The president has committed to doubling the number of school-based mental health professionals. The Department of Education will continue to support state, school districts, colleges, and universities in using relief funds, including the more than $160 billion invested by the American Rescue Plan in elementary and secondary school, Emergency Relief ESSER, and Higher Education Emergency Relief Fund HEERF to address the mental health needs of students, including by training, recruiting, and retaining more school and college and university-based mental health professionals. With the help, guys, just so you know, when you hear that many billions are being spent, you have to sit back and wonder, how do they not have this whole thing fixed with that many billions being spent? How do they not have a program for all Americans, whether they're in school, working a job, they're elderly, they're disabled? How do they not have this fixed? With the help of ESSER funds, schools have already seen a 65% increase in social workers and a 17% increase in counselors to help schools sustain these roles. The Department of Health and Human Services will make it easier for school-based mental health professionals to seek reimbursement from Medicaid, and the president's 2023 budget will propose $1 billion to help schools hire additional counselors and school psychologists and other health professionals. Or, once again, instead of having to create an entire academia school nurse system, we could just have healthcare for all. Right? Am I the only one that's sitting back going like, why can't we just have healthcare for, why can't we, you know what I mean? It would be easier than have to now creating an army of medical staff in academia. Or we could just have an army of medical staff for everybody. Why not? Embed and collate mental health and substance use providers into community-based settings. Expanding pathways to care also means creating new, low-barrier access points and settings where Americans already live, work, and play. To that end, the president's, honestly, I could have written this in bullet points. Like, everything we've read so far could have been done in a single page. What's the plan? You know, when I read through this stuff from the White House, I get angry because it's such a waste of time and it's such a bunch of fluff words. I mean, honestly, like you could bullet point exactly what you would do You could take this entire thing and do it on a single page. Bullet points, each thing that you intend to do with subcategory bullet points of how you're going to do it. It would be more involved, more direct, and a better summary than this crap. That's what it would come down to. Increase behavioral health navigation resource. Oh, okay, so Florida 2023 budget will include $50 million to pilot models and embed and collate medical health services into non-traditional settings like libraries, community centers, schools, and homeless shelters. Or, once again, we could just have healthcare for all. Or we could do that instead of having to build a new massive structure inside every single system that we have. We could just have healthcare for all, right? I mean, wouldn't that be easier? It might be easier. Yeah, okay, cool. All right, so here we go. Increase behavioral health navigation resources. Finding the right care or an available provider can be a frustrating experience. We need to make it easier for Americans both to find help and to receive it. Well, they don't have a hard time finding if they know they have health insurance for all, right? Otherwise, they have a hard time finding it and using it if they don't have health insurance for all, right? There's an easy solution here to this whole roundabout the toilet seat problem, right? All right. To meet this need, the administration will build new, easy-to-access, user-friendly online treatment locator tools, starting with the redesign and refurbished mental health. So Google can't do that. DuckDuckGo can't do that. A search engine can't do that. We need a way to find these places. I mean, why would we spend millions on that? You know what I mean? Like, that's just that's a horrific investment. It's a terrible investment. Now you're going to have one company taking massively over that and biasing that. It's not good. The Department of Defense will also create a one-stop online resource for service members and their families to access mental health information and locate mental health providers. Do you guys ever get frustrated when you read like what the White House has up their sleeve? Because what they have up their sleeve is like a 3. You know what I mean? It's not like it's not a good card. Support Americans by creating healthy environments. We cannot transform mental health solely through the healthcare system. We must also address the determinations of behavioral health, invest in community services, and foster a culture an environment that broadly promotes mental wellness and recovery. This crisis is not a medical one, but a societal one. Well, remember, I'm an attorney reading this. Let's read it again, and then you'll hear what my brain is thinking when I read this. We must also address the determinants of behavioral health, invest in community services, and foster a culture and environment that broadly promotes mental wellness and recovery. So that first sentence was a total waste of my time and yours. Because what did we do? We've just read 8 to 9 pages of that exact same thing over again. Now the following sentence. This crisis is not a medical one, but a societal one. Well, if it was a medical one, we would just have healthcare for all. But since it's a societal one, we're going to fund schools. We're going to fund local facilities. We're going to fund already existing medical facilities and then create a massive force of new people who can go ahead and help, right? Or we could just have healthcare for all. In December 2021, the Surgeon General released an advisory on protecting youth mental health that outlined a wide range of causes for the national youth mental health crisis and underscored growing concern about the harms of digital technologies, particularly social media, to the mental health and well-being of young people, as well as calling for practical action from technology companies to address these concerns. So what you're going to see is that kids under a certain age are not going to be able to access certain content, and those kids will be 18 years old. I mean, it's like, come on. I don't know. I just, you know what I mean? It's just, come on. All right, here we go. We need a whole of society effort to address these concerns. You know what, guys? It's all just boilerplate fluff. Like, here, I'll just any place. I'll flip it. I'll flip it, and then I'll deliver to you the news. And I guarantee you, it will be about putting money into some agency, to some group, right, to go ahead and create more mental health providers. And then when they address it with their fluffy verbiage, right, their diction, they'll go ahead and say what a great thing it is. Here's how many millions we're putting into it, and you won't get any bullet points on how they're going to do it. We're on page 23 of 27. Set students up for success. The next part. When students struggle in school, it impacts their well-being. A comprehensive strategy to support student wellness must also include efforts to address the impact of the pandemic on student learning, particularly on students most impacted by the pandemic, and create supportive learning environments. ED will continue to help states and school districts use the $122 billion in ARP ESSER funds for this purpose. Specifically, the department will help states and districts use the funds to provide, here it comes, guys, more individual and small group instructions, hire instructional and other critical staff, launch high-impact tutorial programs, provide high-quality after-school and summer learning and enrichment programs, and invest in other evidence-based strategies that will help our students recover from the pandemic. Exact outline we talked about. It's this thing, we've read it over and over again. A fluff BS sentence followed by a statement that we've heard before, something that we've heard in life, followed by basically what their plan is, how much money is going to go towards it, and how they're going to hire more people that they already have, and then just going to hire more people. That's the whole thing. If you want to sum this up, it's hire more people. That's it. We're going to hire more people specifically in the groups that we want to fund. But we're not, that's what they're saying here, going to have healthcare for all. We're just going to increase access to it and try and have some people get a Medicaid option. Or rather, yes, a Medicaid option. So that's basically what this comes down to. It's not a good write-up. It's not. Hold on, let me get Sweetie real quick. Sweetie. All right, guys. So I'm not going to go through the rest of this. It's a disappointment. And when I read these White House releases, they're kind of, to me, disgusting. They're not a plan. They're an executive summary that's poorly written. All right. Now, with that said, Sweetie, with that said, we are now going to change gears, if you will. And we're going to go ahead and change gears into this different thing of what's going on with Ukraine. Now, I'm going to be reaching out to specifically an individual who can walk us through the security measures related to it. Now, with that said, I have to let Sweetie out because, as you know, Sweetie is now going after Shadow. So let's do this. Let me go through here real quick. I'm going to go ahead. I need exactly 30 seconds, and I will be right back. 1 second, guys. Sweetie. And I'm back, just like a bandit, ripping it off and getting to the good part. Now, guys, here's the thing. As we go through this next part, some of it will be depressing to you. I've now gotten word that Chernobyl, like where the big whoops happened, the big bad whoops, that's on fire right now. We're going to go ahead and go into what's happening with Ukraine because it's important, because it talks about what the U.S. is doing, what Biden is doing, how things basically unroll, etc. I'm going to make a call right now and see if I can get the individual on the line. Let's see what we can do real quick here. Hold on. Let me scroll through here. Now, remember, guys, this is very important stuff. So please, please, please listen up, partake in this. This is important. And as we go through this, remember, go ahead, put whatever comments you want. That's fine. All right, here we go. Now, Attorney Walter not here. Good, sir. I wanted to go ahead and connect you to this live session. I wanted to talk specifically about Ukraine. As a security expert, there's a lot of really extreme things going on right now. What I'd like to ask you about is, where is Ukraine at with battling Russia in this war? What are some of the new developments, and what are some of the things we can expect from these developments?
Good evening, Walter. My pleasure coming on with you again. Lots happened just in the last 24 hours. Remarkably, just in the last 48 minutes, reporting the Russian troops have shelled a nuclear power station in the Enderhar, Ukraine area. It's a 6 nuclear reactor site. The reactor that was shelled was not. It's currently under repair. Let's put it that way. It's not operational. The nuclear fuel cells are still inside. There was a great deal of issue getting the fire department to come in and begin suppression to keep it cool and start taking care of business. Unfortunately, they were the firefighters couldn't get near the fire because they were getting shot at. This is according to Andre Tuz, the spokesperson for the plant itself. There's some live stream security cameras from their homepage. Shows armored vehicles rolling into the parking lot, shining spotlights on the building where the camera was mounted, and it appeared to be bright muzzle flashes from the vehicles and simultaneous explosions in the surrounding buildings, being the rockets hitting the reactor that was under repair. There's conflicting information whether the radiation readings near the plant are up or not, but it is something that when we talk about concerns for nuclear and destructive actions by the Russian forces, I don't think this was on the radar until about 24 hours ago, when a UN, United Nations atomic monitoring agency expressed some concerns during their inspection, which resulted in some proactive movement. Unfortunately, this is just, hopefully they can get this under control. Hopefully the people in the immediate area who recognized they were near a reactor facility understand that they needed to leave immediately, as they did. Trying to get out on any sort of transportation right now within the country is extremely difficult. Over 1 million refugees have fled the country successfully, according to multiple sources, but it's just horrific. In the event that they are unsuccessful in curbing and stabilizing this, the nuclear fuel, Mr. Tuzz's immediate statement, again, he's a spokesperson for the facility, indicated it would be multiple times worse than Chernobyl.
Yeah.
We can only think and hope and pray that they do get it under control and they're able to sustain it and stabilize it. Again, when we think of nuclear attacks and destructive attacks, we've seen quite a bit of it in the last few days. This is day 8 of Russia crossing into the sovereignty of Ukraine, and here we are. It just wasn't really up until a day or so, 24 hours maybe. They're 13 hours ahead for folks. They're 13 hours, 13 hours ahead of Eastern Standard Time. So if you use New York City time of 9:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, add 13 hours to it. That's already in their Friday already. So heard early in the morning for them, and again was verified by 2 sources that this took place. So hopefully you come to some forward movement without having to take this on. I hope they get this under control soon. Try and get an update before we hang up. That was about 45 minutes ago, validated by two reputable sources. So we go back just less than 24 hours ago, and we have paratroopers descending onto Ukraine, and their Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, warned that a third world would be nuclear and destructive, especially warning NATO not to intervene militarily in Ukraine. This is only a day after the previous peace talks failed. And again, before they even left the table, Russia was back on with their fight. Ukraine's defense minister, Minister of Defense, Ukraine Olensky Rezanov, he confirms the air arrival of the troops, and it's just an ongoing fight between the invaders and the Ukrainians. Massive shelling and bombing. As we talked about and forecasted in our last conversation, urban warfare is well underway. We're calling out today for guerrilla warfare on the southern flank as the amphibious forces took over one of the Kherson, and we're heading towards Maklovia on the Black Sea ship port and setting up a ground attack for Odessa, which is the naval base. And again, they were encouraged to call up citizens, rise up and wage guerrilla warfare against these invaders. And this is what we anticipated. What was interesting is how they learned this and learned very quickly, regardless of their involvement in the military. was how to operate a firearm and how to make a Molotov cocktail. And there's video of a tank coming into a downtown area, and it starts to get shelled on both sides by not bullets, but Molotov cocktails. As it tries to back out, it gets shelled again with more Molotov cocktails. And it appeared to be that type of urban or guerrilla warfare, if you will. Bit of a surprise to Soviet troops. It's just been an issue. The troops that were in that 40-mile-long convoy that was stalled or parked outside the north of Kiev, about 15 miles north of Kiev, hasn't moved all that much. They show a video of the tanks moving, only to be stopped a short time later. They're really not making a lot of progress in the last couple of days. There are fuel shortages, food shortages, food and fuel. I don't think I said that quite right. They're keeping the troops from advancing on Kiev, and it's become an issue. It's become a significant issue. Ultimately, they also have not used proper military tactics. And if you think back to any of the war movies we've ever seen, there's always a handful of military personnel walking on either side of the tank. That's to keep people, similar to the Molotov cocktail attack I just described on a tank in the city, from getting that close and being that dangerous to a tank commander who can't see to the sides. He can see pretty much straight ahead. So this is not going as expected. Not going as expected. What we do know from yesterday is, again, the Minister of Defense, Rezanov, was talking about I'll translate here, which is unmanned drones have already arrived in Ukraine and are on combat duty. More Stingers. A Stinger is a man-portable air defense system. Basically operates an infrared homing surface-to-air missile. Really, really interesting weapon. It can also be adapted to fire from either the ground or vehicles or helicopters. And the minister also spoke about javelins, and that's a British man-made surface-to-air missile, formerly used by the Brits and Canadian armies, and it can be fired from the shoulder or from a dedicated launcher. They're lightweight, and they're basically, the comments from the minister ended with, Europe is becoming our rear supply, what is needed for their critical defense, and we're at the forefront of the free world, meaning the democracy that the Ukraine had. So quite a few folks have seen the devastation of the rocket striking the TV tower, which was used for a lot of the communications, and very little about the private maternity hospital and clinic and children's nursery that were victims of rocket attacks. And the thought here is, this is to soften the citizens for what may be an imminent ground invasion. And the idea here is, if they agree to stop attacking or missile strikes or rocket strikes by the Russian troops into these areas that should not be hit, there's no reason to soften the citizens into accepting these tanks rolling through their towns. Just a little crazy. Just a little bit crazy. The president did say yesterday, he said it again today, and I'll translate it. Everybody has to stop fighting before we're ready to talk about peace. And it's a good point. Sadly, it seems to be one way. Very, very sad. One of the cities that fell today was Kherson. Kherson is in the south. It's a vital seaport. Sea of Azov, just north of the Black Sea. And Mariupol, just north of that. Amphibious forces have knocked out the heat, the water, and have cut off food delivery So it's very difficult, not only in communications in those locations, to determine where they're at. Kherson was a city of about 280,000. Mariupol is smaller. But once Kherson was secure, again, the troops are heading off towards setting up ground forces for an offense anticipated on Odessa, which is the largest Ukraine naval base. Very sad, very sad. So as this moves on.
So I guess the big question for me is, I mean, look, Biden has the capacity to take over Ukraine in total, but with this giant air force, with this giant group 40 miles long of tanks and personnel, etc. So what I don't understand is we've gotten this far down the line. He could have taken over this entire country in a matter of 2 to 3 days by bringing a massive force down. Why is this happening and unraveling like this, where everybody is starting to grow with love and support for Ukraine? That's completely against his agenda. I mean, how did we get to this point?
That's a great question. Mr. Putin claims that the reason he was in building up his troops was for training missions and peacekeeping. The fact of the matter is, this goes back to 2014, where Ukraine became independent of the Soviet Union, and that's real estate that's incredibly closer to Russia, which gives them less of a response time. And his theory publicly is to jeopardize the security of his nation. Now let's return to the question of the U.S. So three countries three countries we can talk about that are not part of NATO. And I'll come back to NATO. I don't think a lot of people really understand where it came from, what it means, and what it does. And then we'll get into refugee funding and other resources. But we have Sweden, we have Finland, and we have Ukraine, not Crimea, but Ukraine, that are not members of NATO. So one of the agreements NATO has with its allied partners and members is it's all for one, one for all. If we're going to get involved in a battle, it'll be to support one of our nation partners, or members, I should say, nation members. Ukraine is not. So this evening, Defense Secretary Austin was on NBC News with Lester Holt. And what ends up happening is a conversation about the convoy and the use of the convoy. And General Austin basically says it's a large combat power. Mr. Putin can choose to escalate or de-escalate using diplomatic solutions as they tried at the table. And Ukraine's basically serving as an inspiration for everyone to learn that anything's possible to defend yourself. And we just talked about how they were doing that. Second question was, why no aircraft? Why no U.S. aircraft in the airspace? Why is there no NATO aircraft in the airspace? One of the things that's very realistic is if we create a no-fly zone over Ukraine, and we have to engage Russian jets. If the United States aircraft have to engage Russian jets, we've just started the World War. We just started a battle with Russia. So the goal is to build up defensive networks around the area as Russia tries to move their jets across Ukraine or into other countries that are NATO partners. It allows them to know as they see or pick up on their radar U.S. and other NATO ally aircraft. You can't be here. You can't be here. We can't protect that airspace. we can't protect that airspace right now. Should we would then violate the NATO rules, and now we have personally taking on U.S. versus Russia, and it's not taking place in Philly; it's taking place in Ukraine.
So
It's very difficult.
Yeah, another big thing I want to ask you about is that, and I've noticed that, essentially it was almost like politicians were celebrating and they were applauding the sanctions, ruining the Russian economy in a total of a day, maybe a day and a half. And what that made me fear was that that would push Russia into the arms of China. A new Soviet era versus Allied era would exist with large portions of Africa going with China, large portions of Pakistan, Uzbekistan, those types of countries joining with Russia, versus, of course, U.S. allies, and then we become this split up agenda of two world economies that are competing against each other. And what concerns me is that China has already said that they fully support and agree with and will not sanction Russia, which means Russia now must join directly to China. So, what is the long game on this with the US, with the economy situation? Because ruining Russia's economy only creates a war.
Good point. Good point. Just hours ago, China has changed their position, and they have come out and actually said, "Hey, this has got to end." They've made it very clear through why that this needs to end. This is not what we are, and this was broadcast through the Chinese media. One could only hope that it was true. The sources, the active sources, give it about a 70% validation, and we can only hope that this is how it works. The banks have been closed in Russia for the third day. The currency in Russia is the ruble, and it's currently valued at less than one U.S. penny. It could cause a default in Russia. They have a $700 million debt payment due for bonds, and then they have like a multi-billion-dollar payment due in April. And several things could potentially happen here. One is if Mr. Putin loses faith amongst his troops and his people, very easy to see him ousted. To take on Ukraine is not with the support of his people. This is one man making the decision. And I'm mirroring General Austin's comments this is one man. This is one man that decided this is going to happen. And it's just incredibly, I don't want to say crazy, but again, the troops the mainstream media tells a few different stories, and they're being told on their side that they're there to liberate Ukrainians, and they're liberating them from a democratic comedian, if you will. Speaking of President Zelensky, and they're there to liberate. They're not well fed. I'm talking about Russia again. We know this, and I think even though Ukraine's responsible for 12% of the world's wheat and grain, and Russia's got like another 12%. If he's successful, they'll have a full 25%. If Mr. Putin's successful, I don't know who he's going to get to come back and work those fields, but that's kind of where this thing rolls out. Hey, before I pull away, and if you don't mind, I just one of the things that we did pick up was one of the oligarchs had his almost $8 million yacht sabotaged by a Ukrainian mechanic. That was a crew member aboard the ship. And the guy's a mechanic. He's in the bowels of the ship, and he opens up all the ship valves, allowing the seawater to come flooding the lower levels of the ship. including the electronics and engines, and massive flooding and extensive damage to the yacht as it took on all this seawater. And the mechanic was arrested, and the ship limped to port. And the mechanic said he had never fired a gun in his life, but his hands still know how to hurt the Russian ship owner, both financially and emotionally. He was later released. The mechanic was later released. Said he would head to the 1st Ukraine fighting unit and offer what he could to fight for his country. And just a interesting story to me of somebody who figured out a way. In regards to the oligarchs, what we're going to start to see is a massive effort to not just take their assets, even though they're hidden in countries that we can't go get them. Mostly their yachts and supercars, if you will. But there is a move to coming after their cyber accounts and coming after other hidden funds and using a lot of resources that aren't normally used for that seizure. And the idea is if we can cut that down, if we can cut down their access to money, we can also cut down their access to many things. And that's the thought behind it. But what are the the oil prices today? We're still over $100 a barrel, and our president has indicated he'll somehow release some of the reserves. There's conversation to remove the federal taxes from fuel if the gas prices are higher than whatever number they randomly pick. But the concern is not having that tax down the road injures our infrastructure if it's used for rebuilding bridges and roadways and the infrastructure that we need to create for our own folks. It's a bit of a hardship for many people as the gas prices continue to rise. It also impacted, the sole battle has impacted a Russian mission to Mars that was scheduled to launch later this year. It's just unprecedented that anybody wants to do business with Russia right now. There'll be a few. Hungary signed on new trade agreement. Don't know the details. It's too fresh, but that's got a high percentage of validity. I do want to explain what the UN general, the UN. Very few folks know about it. Can I speak about it for a minute?
Yeah, of course.
I'm not tied to any of the resources. So back after World War II, they created the United Nations, and it was founded in 1949. And the thought was to foster this, as I spoke before, mutual assistance in response to the Soviet Union's expansion in Europe. And it stands at like 190 countries right now, and there's no mandatory payment. They've leveled it. They've identified a formula that works because it's expensive to operate some of the things that they do, and it's just the General Assembly of the United Nations. Their thing is let us mediate. There's a whole list of things that the United Nations does, and it has primarily four main purposes. And the first one's like to keep peace throughout the world, to develop friendly relationships among nations, to help nations work together, to improve the lives of poor people, to conquer hunger, disease and illiteracy, and to encourage respect for each other's rights and freedoms, and to be a center for harmonizing the activities and actions of nations to hit these goals. The contribution scale that they adopted, who are the four largest contributors? The United States is number one, 22% of the UN budget. China was 12%, Japan was 8%, Germany 6%. And it's all agreed upon a scale of assessments. It's based on a country's ability to pay, national income, population size, and they're very unique. I'm sorry, I said 191. It's 193 member states. And their goal is to reach out all over the world for human rights and advancement of women and good governance, economic and social development, international health, clearing landmines, food production. But the budget's big. And last year, the staff and basic infrastructure was $5.4 billion with a B. Current budget for 1 year of UN peacekeeping, that was before this event, was $6.8 billion in comparison to 2006, where they spent nearly $2 trillion on military expenditures. So what about the conflict? Who's funding helping these nations? Who's funding it? It's going to come out of not only the United Nations, but another organization called USAID. And this was established back with President John Kennedy. And he created this United States agency for international development. He did it by presidential executive order in 1961. And it was for exactly this. So the United States Agency for International Development is USAID, and it's an independent government agency that receives overall policy guidance from the Secretary of State Department, and it provides both economic development, humanitarian assistance around the world in over 100 countries with the support of the foreign policy goals of the U.S. And it's welfare of ordinary Ukrainians in mind that they announced their nearly $54 million from the State Department, from the U.S. only, and $28 million from the USAID organization. And that was last week announced. And now lawmakers on Capitol Hill said it's not nearly enough, and they're considering an additional over $2 billion in funding. And one of the things that I think folks forget about when they talk about humanitarian aid, if you have 1 million people, 1 million people in 8 days exit a country and go into nearby countries, it's overwhelming. It's absolutely overwhelming. The thought of that many people occupying some of these smaller countries, Moldova, Bulgaria, the Baltic states, it's just overwhelming. This is where this funding comes from, and it's the anticipation of what might be a significant need in Poland, Moldova, and the other countries I just mentioned, to provide refugee receiving nations and providing food, water, shelter, and other basic needs for these folks. Poland already indicated Ukrainians can stay 3 years. If they can get there, they can stay up to 3 years. The State Department today said they're closely monitoring and coordinating with international partners to address the humanitarian needs in Ukraine. This speaks exactly to it. We stress that accepting access to health facilities must be safe, sustainable, with essential medicine, supplies, and services, and they call on all parties to allow immediate, safe, and unhindered humanitarian access for humanitarian agencies and their vital work in Ukraine. And it's happening. It's happening. From the UN to religious organizations, this is what's happening as these people are leaving. Some of the videos my organization has access to is just remarkable and heart-wrenching to see a family at the border hand over their children and turn around and go back and fight, and giving their children to complete strangers, hoping that they return to be able to see their children again. Just devastating to see some of this taking place, where the children in the hospital, substructures and basements that cannot be moved based on their health, and they can't come off oxygen. They can't come off the meds that are only available and not transportable in those locations. It's just heartbreaking. It really is. But it appeared that NATO and NATO forces are being respectful of what's taking place there. And it's difficult. It's difficult to watch. On a different note, we've got like 93, almost 94% verification that a high-ranking Russian general has been killed during the fight in Ukraine, supposedly by a sniper. That's the part we're still unsure of. That's 7%. It's a bitter blow for Mr. Putin. The Major General Andrei Sokovsky was the commanding general of the Russian 7th Airborne and a deputy commander of the 41st Combined Arms District. And it was reported by a colleague who he's spent a great deal of time with over the last years. And it just kind of significantly impact the morale of the Russian forces. Apparently he was very well respected and just rather difficult. On another note, and then I'll come back to your questions, it's almost what we're watching, but what we don't watch. So this morning at I'll call 5 a.m., was validated 5 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, a small formation of Chinese warships have been detected off the coast southeast of Taiwan for the last 3 days. The maritime maneuvers came shortly after I can't do that. United States Navy, the unnamed United States Navy ship with very advanced combat equipment vessel sailed nearby and kind of caught the glimpse of this. Later, 3 PLA, People's Liberation Army, Chinese Navy, another 3 sailed by within 30 miles, heading south of a popular tourist location of Taiwan's Orchid Island, which is about 21 nautical miles south of Taiwan proper. The following day, a single Chinese guided missile frigate was detected late in the evening, between 7 and 11 p.m. local time there. And the Taiwanese Navy radar picked it up, and warships were moving south into the Bashi Channel by yesterday. The Bashi Channel is an important piece. If we don't look away, we'll miss this. But the Bashi Channel is a waterway between the Philippines and Orchid Island of Taiwan. It's part of the Luzon Strait in the Pacific Ocean. And the key is it's a really important passage for military operations. The Philippines and Taiwan dispute over the ownership of the water, because both say it's within 200 miles of their shores. But this strategic position allows the submarines to go right into the Pacific much more efficiently. And that channel is also where a lot of the undersea cables are, that carries data and telephone traffic between Asian countries, and it passes right through the channel. Major points of failure for the internet back in 2006 based on a earthquake, submariner earthquake. It cut out several undersea cables at the same time. It took weeks and weeks and weeks to rebuild it, but it's just something to keep an eye on. I think we have talked about China and Taiwan and the impact, and it's something to not look away from while we're captivated with the day-to-day, moment-to-moment battles of this country being invaded from both the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov by amphibious troops and aircraft overhead, and just wrap it all the way around up to Belarus. And it's big. It's big. Where are we? How long will this go on for?
So I want to ask you this. It's either going to de-escalate or it's going to become something bigger. We're either going to see the president of Ukraine captured, uh, or we're going to see basically Ukraine, quasi succeed. And I mean, there's no pure succeeding at this point because the country in large areas has been destroyed. But I guess one of the big things a lot of people are wondering, and as a security expert on this, it's one of the things that I think people are the most scared about, which is what are examples of occurrences where they're kind of like a heads up or trigger points for us acknowledging that this whole scenario could become a nuclear war. I know if the US joins in, it becomes a nuclear war, but what other signs would dictate that this would become nuclear?
So when we talk about nuclear, I think in our last conversation, we did well in describing the difference between a tactical and a full-blown Nagasaki multi-kiloton bomb. The tacticals are well, in theory, they're very, very precise and serve a very specific purpose. And it's something that when we look at, maybe the nuclear is actions similar to what took place in Impaired earlier today, or just hours ago, I should say. We're only about an hour and probably about an hour and 10 minutes into this validation. And do we see it coming here? Do we see dirty bombs and this and that? Do we see tactical nukes here? Do we see the mother of all bombs coming here? Here's the two bombs we're going to talk about just for a second, just to put it into perspective. The news is reporting these things. You need to know what they are. One's called a vacuum bomb, also known as a thermobaric bomb. This weapon's been spotted with Russian convoys inside Ukraine, and it's also known as the TOS-1A multiple rocket launcher. It's got a range of around 2.5 miles and a blast radius that extends out about 1,000 feet. And it's a two-part bomb, and everything that's inside that radius is virtually vaporized. So it's a vacuum bomb. It's also known as an aerosol bomb. Sometimes you'll hear it being referred to, and you can hear it a lot, is an FAE. FAE. It stands for fuel air explosive. And what it is consists of a fuel container with two separate explosive charges. So this thing can be launched as a rocket, dropped as a bomb, and when it hits the target, the first explosive charge opens the fuel container, and it widely scatters the fuel mixture as a cloud, almost like it is a atomized cloud of fuel. This cloud can penetrate any building openings, under doorways, hallways, any and all rooms that are not completely sealed off with its own air supply, if you will. The second charge comes just immediately or very soon after, within seconds, and it detonates the cloud. And this results in a huge fireball and a massive blast wave. Now, I've got to remember, it's 1,000 feet approximately in directions. But here's why it's so deadly. It creates a vacuum as the fireball needs oxygen to burn. We know there's three sides of the fire triangle. It needs oxygen. It needs fuel, right, and energy. So the fireball sucks up all the surrounding oxygen, including the air in your lungs, and can burn a person to death from the inside out. This weapon can destroy reinforced buildings and equipment, and kill and injure. It's just horrific. The second one is known as a cluster bomb. And there's video that's available to the public now on a cluster bomb being activated, taken from home video. What that does is the bomb
the cluster bombs are basically weapons that open in the air, and they release mini bombs or bomblets, if you will, submunitions. That's some machine guns, tiny bombs. These are dispersed over a large area, and they're intended to just create destruction of multiple targets all at once. They're designed for conventional military use. They can be launched from low-flying helicopter, a plane, a drone, flying at low altitudes. And this bomb is not for use in urban environments. But the video that if you end up seeing it, you won't see the big portion. You'll see the bomblets, and it spreads out over a wide area in an urban environment. Both these weapons, vacuum bomb, also known as the thermobaric, and the cluster bomb, are both no longer considered weapons of war by the Geneva Convention. No longer considered permissible weapons. They're being used in Ukraine, and it's validated and videos available to the public.
So, I mean, is he just, I mean, they're talking about him being a war criminal, but he's the president of Russia. So, I mean, I remember the Nuremberg trials. I remember trials that were beyond that. But at the bottom line, the judicial system, my people, the lawyers, the judges, the international court system, I mean, what power do they have against somebody like Russia?
So, interestingly enough, there is a Russian-born, very wealthy individual who lives in the United States. He has a California-based business, a member of the public. He is not an oligarch. He's just very well respected in his industry. And he's offered $1 million from his personal account to any individual in Russia or group of people, including military, that take Mr. Putin into custody as a war criminal to be tried in the Hague, which is the military tribunal. And it's starting to get out that this guy's offered this money. It should be interesting. It's one man, and it does not appear he has much support from his military leadership. The death of Major General that we spoke of a few minutes ago. Did he die by Ukraine sniper, or was it self-inflicted due to poor planning of fuel and food for the troops? I don't know. I don't have that validated just yet. Again, that's a sniper piece we're not too sure of. But if Mr. Putin's asked for Chechen troops, and they're known for a long history of brutality, and they shouldn't arrive. That's if he is at the negotiations table and talking about creating corridors for evacuation of civilians and aid to those in need for humanitarian reasons. Before he leaves the table, he's already got things happening. He hasn't put a ceasefire call out. So the answer may be the long game. Hey, is Russia will replace the Ukraine government, and we hope they don't trip across into any of the NATO boundaries because that brings it on, or they'll take control of just the Ukraine land, similar to what occurred in Crimea in 2014. And the last scenario could be Mr. Putin is overthrown. But the humanitarian side is growing. And why do we care about Ukraine? Because it should never happen on our soil. I did mention Sweden and Finland earlier. They're not NATO alliance partners. They have been very quiet up until yesterday. And Soviet Su-24s, two Soviet Su-27s came through their airspace. The public side says they're forcibly removed from the airspace by Swedish jets. And fact of the matter is, there's some reporting with about 70%. No, that's not true. 67% accuracy. They had no weapon systems on them, but what they did have was extra fuel tanks and reconnaissance cameras for long range and flying low over civilian and industrial properties with very low flight pattern that made it difficult for their radar to find them. But they did, and it moved them to DEFCON 2. The airships from Russia came from a strategic nuclear airstrike unit stationed out of Moscow, which is about 1,000 miles from where this took place. Sweden's calling for an immediate meeting with Russian leaders regarding this. But again, they're saying they just were there hanging out. And again, this is another piece that we don't think to keep an eye out for, which is where are the people going, and what does it mean? There's some other info that just is kind of mind-blowing, that kind of was forecast with this UN inspection for atomic on nuclear energy and watchdogs and reporting that this is a problem. And here we have it in real time that I hope they get this thing under control. And more importantly, I hope we can keep the Ukrainian citizens as well as the Russian guys. Let's keep them safe. Go home.
Yeah.
Go home.
Yeah.
Right? Just go home.
Well, excellent. I guess the big concern I have and I see with this situation is that as the chess game continues, Putin is like a wounded bear, and he's egotistically destroyed at this point. He's upset, he's angry, he's frustrated. The posturing is going to not get him out of this. So now he knows we're coming down to pure force. He knows that he needs Ukraine for financial purposes, even though he has to destroy it and then rebuild it to go ahead and utilize it. So I guess the big thing that I'm worried about with this situation is, at what point does Russia gain support from other nations? At what point does Russia, really start to have a change in its approach to this? Because right now it was almost like a held back, cutesy, we're going to go after this country. And most people in America thought Ukraine was just a small little itty bitty country. It's not. It's like the second largest nation over there, after Russia when it comes to the European countries or something like that. It's a huge country. They had what was it, over 200,000 something troops or something. So
Yes.
I guess for me, what I'm worried about is Russia tried to bite the smaller dog. The smaller dog was able to run away. The smaller dog has consistently been able to hide, even though it's taken on damage. And now Russia is going to finally corner the smaller dog and shake the smaller dog until the dog passes away. I know that America is taking the stance as, the final game boss of NATO to stand back. But when other countries get involved, how many NATO countries will need to be involved than America to get involved? And the big problem I foresee with this is that Russia will expend significant amounts to make this Ukraine situation happen in the way they want now, because they're done. Their investment is in. They have to win this. They cannot limp home. So I guess the problem I foresee is that, is nuclear likely? Right now, it doesn't feel like it is, but the end game of Russia being successful almost requires it to some degree, if they are not able to, within the next couple of days, sever the head of Ukraine and take over. So can you tell me, bottom line here, what are we looking at over the next 2 weeks? What are your expectations? Your summarized, here's my bullet points on where we're going to be at on Sunday, where we're going to be at on Wednesday, and next Sunday again. What do you think is going to happen?
So, because it's just incredible, we didn't see any amphibious landings in the southern part or northern Black Sea entrances to the seaports. We didn't see any concerns immediately in the Sea of Azov. We could see it as the troops lined up around the northern part of Ukraine and on the Russian border, and nobody believed for a second that Russia was going to make the move it started out with. And even fewer people were aware of how resilient the Ukrainians were, despite everything going on around them. I look at it, and the group I'm working with is looking at it in much smaller pieces. Do we see the maritime troops, the amphibious folks who have already landed and created just crazy? They took Kherson. Kherson's like 200,000 people. And whether Ukraine President Zelensky saw it coming, didn't see it coming, but now it's an all-out survival piece. When we look at the troops that are on the ground and the fighting that's going on in basically throughout the entire country, and the moves that some of the amphibious personnel carriers and attack helicopters are making around the edge of the Baltics, and it's just day to day. It's difficult to say, and the thought behind it is this: some of these troops are fighting. Ukrainians are fighting the troops coming at them from the east. We hope there's an awareness that the troops coming from the sea are coming up behind them. And the idea is to encircle these cities, take over the government buildings, whether they're in Russian clothing or street clothing, and pulling weapons as they walk in the door. Has been reported in Kherson when they took the government building, and just very difficult. Where do I see it? I see it being, unless one of these Russian troops trips across the line, and when they do, they're not going to expect what's waiting on the other side. I believe NATO is fully prepared. I believe the countries that surround Poland and some of the other countries, Germany and some of these other countries, I should say, are putting massive weapon supplies into the country. I mentioned Sweden earlier, sending 1,500 anti-tank weapons down to the Ukraine. They figured out how to get the weapons. There was concern in our last call of how they would get the weapons to the troops fighting. And they need to do it quickly. They need to get this done quickly, because if they surround the cities and then move on, it's destabilizing on all ends. Was it a strategic move? Yeah, sure it was. Just not enough communications when you have that many troops on your borders. Back to your question, where is it? Let's see if we can get the fire under control so it doesn't become a nuclear issue in the country. And whatever their nuclear fuel cells are in the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, whatever those fuel cells are, even though it's under renovation, so to speak, where's that ash going? Where's that smoke going? What's the hazards to the citizens in the neighboring countries where this ash and material may land? And it's difficult to say if Poland has enough personal protection equipment for their people, but now you have refugees, and it's pretty overwhelming. The next 12 hours may be very interesting, depending on how this nuclear piece rolls out. What do we see? We see some of the models are showing that Russian troops keep coming from land and sea and the air. They keep just using the weapons that they have, the guided missiles that they have, non-nuclear, but let's keep the citizens and the resistance force as busy as we can and encircle these cities and take the country. And a real possibility in the next, I'd say, 3 days, 5 days. But the Ukrainians are so resilient, and these weapons are coming into their possession. It becomes a game changer every time they do that. It becomes a game changer. I don't see a 2-week window. My concern is, and I speak on behalf of the working group, is that this does not become a long event without NATO involved. That it doesn't. It's bad enough to have your homes evacuated, your citizenry evacuated, but if the problems still exist on the Russian side, it becomes a problem for everyone because they can't get they can't back out. They can't die. They can die, but at the end of the day, the Ukraine have the strength to push them back off their boundaries, and it oscillates. Here we have the tank brigade that can't get enough food and fuel to travel. How do we move against that? Well, we give them anti-tank weapons. So the guerrilla warfare and the urban warfare, and they just go after the tanks. They just go after the tanks and start destroying that convoy, sadly. Until, does an airstrike come in and take them out? This is what we're looking at. If they trip across the line, if the Russians trip across any of the NATO countries' lines, it becomes a different game. Completely different game. Hands off. Gloves off. I'm sorry, gloves off. No.
Excellent.
We're going 24 hours at a time.
Yeah.
Like we wouldn't.
Yeah, and it keeps taking these turns that nobody's expecting. But well, excellent, good sir. I'm going to go ahead and begin answering some of the disability questions. But thank you so much for coming on the show. I know a lot of people have been very interested in this topic. I know a lot of people are looking for the truth, and you've certainly provided details relative to what's coming, what's happened. And I thank you immensely because this has really helped a lot of people who want to know directly what's going to happen next,
Be safe, stay smart, and my regards to everyone.
Thank you, good sir. Have a wonderful night.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, guys, so what's amazing about all of that communication is that he has outlined basically all of the things that are going on. And the main functional problem of this situation when it comes to Russia is that little line in the sand between going beyond Ukraine. The other issue is that Russia has this massive armament. They are capable of taking over Ukraine in total, resilient crew or not. Let's start taking these questions. People calling in. Here we go. All righty. Hi, this is Attorney Walter Knott. We are live on YouTube. Would you like me to go ahead and answer a specific question, or would you like me to go ahead and run hearing questions with you? And remember, use a fake name throughout this process. Go ahead. Oh, are you there? Hello. Looks like we can't hear that person. Let me go ahead and go to the next thing, and then we'll go ahead and bring Sweetie in. Let's see real quick. Okay. Hi, this is Attorney Walter Knott. Remember to use a fake name throughout this process. Also, so you got to go ahead and mute your side of the phone. Let's go right into this real quick. So this is Attorney Walter. Hi, this is Attorney Walter Knott. We are live right now. Remember to use a fake name. Would you like me to answer a specific question, or would you like me to go ahead and run hearing questions with you?
I would like you to read my questions with me. Are you talking about the questions that I sent you?
Yeah. If you sent me I haven't had a chance obviously to read them yet, but go ahead and text me right now the email that they came from, and then what I'll do is I'll go ahead and basically look them up real quick, and then you can kind of give me a summary as to what's going on. So go ahead.
Okay. I can text them right now. Thank you so much. Hold on, I'm going to be playing it.
Perfect. Sounds good. So while she's texting, guys, I'm going to take a 1-minute break. I'm going to go let Sweetie in. Sweetie, as you know, always gets what she wants. Give me 1 second. We're going to be right back. 1 second, guys. Hold on. Okay, perfect, guys. We are back. I'm going to look for that text message right now and see if I can see which email this came from. Then we'll go ahead and begin with the questions portion of this. Give me 1 second. Okay, let's see. So have you been successful with sending over the text, whatchamacallit, ready for basically me to go ahead and look at?
Yes, I just sent it to you right now. It's coming from another phone number because I couldn't use this phone.
Sure.
Because I'm on it, so I have to send it from another phone number.
Okay, cool. Let me check real quick. Okay, so I see that right
I just
there.
sent it right now.
Okay.
Yes.
Let me see if I can pull that up. Okay, I see this real quick.
Thank you.
Now I see a couple of emails. I see one at 5:15 p.m. I see one at 8:19 p.m. Which one am I going to be reading?
It's the first one that I sent during the day today. I think it's probably the 2 p.m. one.
Okay, perfect. So let's see what we got here. Here we are. Okay, perfect. I've got it here. Go ahead. I'm going to read it. Give me an introduction while, so everybody knows kind of what's going on. And I'll go ahead and read it through
Sure.
while you're giving me perfect. Excellent. Go ahead, ma'am.
Sure. Yeah. So about 3 years ago in 2017, I was diagnosed with cancer. I didn't think about applying for disability. I was hoping I'd get better, and things got worse and worse and worse. And I think it was in 2018, like a year and a half later, where I decided to apply for SSDI. I just applied for disability. I didn't know which one I was going to get, whether I was going to get SSI or SSDI. Within the next, I think, 4 to 5, it took maybe 6 months where they started reviewing my case, and I think about literally 2 months later, they approved me, and they approved me for like SSDI. The three things that I applied under, and I did this without an attorney, the three things that I applied under to get Social Security disability was chest pain secondary to radiation-induced damages that I had gotten from radiation therapy for the cancer, sleep apnea, and depression. So I was approved for that, and a little while ago I looked into my case because my review was given to me every 3 years. So we're hitting the 3-year marker in March where they're going to be reviewing me. So I followed up with the Social Security people, and I found out that the diagnosis that they had basically accepted me under wasn't the three things I had applied for, which were the chest pain, the sleep apnea, and the depression. Supposedly they had accepted me under two different conditions, which I don't have up right now. One of them I think was trauma, and the other one was obsessive compulsive something, and anxiety. So these two were the two. I wrote them to you in an email. Mm-hmm. So these two were the two codes they had me under. So I'm really confused at this point when my review is coming up. Are they going to be doing the review on the three initial diagnoses which I applied under? Or are they going to be doing the review on the diagnoses that they decided to give me? And another important thing is that when I applied, I said onset date was the day I got cancer, which was February 2017. According to them, I've been disabled ever since January 2015. So the onset date they gave me is totally different than the onset date I had asked for or I had told them. So I'm kind of confused at how they decided all this and where do I go from here when I do have my review coming up.
Okay. So, and keep in mind, there's a person, it's actually 3 people calling back to back. So I'll try to answer this. The other kicker is like, so many people calling in, it's hard for me to answer it, but it sounds like originally you were found disabled under 2 particular impairments. Those are the main impairments that they use for your adjudication going forward, using what's called the 8-step sequential process to see whether or not you are still as severe as you were back in the day for those impairments. If you have new impairments, if your new impairments need to be considered, they'll include those into it. But that's only after they decide that your original impairments do not meet the severity requirements of the original adjudication law that was put in place when you were found disabled. So what happens is they'll look at your old impairments. Are you still as disabled as you were? If you've gotten better, they'll do a new review to see if these new impairments basically are applicable at the level needed to be found disabled. Now you get a short form, and I see question 1, if I get the short CDR form and I answer yes to having any surgeries within the past year, would that trigger for me to have a full CDR? Well, remember, a full CDR can still occur with the short form. they're still capable of going in and buying off your records, reviewing it, sending it off to an MCPC, and then basically completing the file. So don't think of it as short form equals, essentially no big review. It could still be a big review. It's just a shorter form where usually it has to blossom into more things for there to be a bigger review. Now, the long form, okay, let's see what the other question is real quick. What are the chances of me getting the initial short CDR questionnaire form as opposed to getting the long 10-page form and going under full review? Yeah, don't think of it as the big 10-page, yada yada as a monster. Think of it more like this. What you're worried about is essentially how deep of a review. But remember, when they do this and they see basically improvement, that's going to trigger a larger review. If you went to school or you started a job or you basically had you were making money through some online business or you were selling Etsy this or whatever, these are all things that are going to create a formal review. If you post pictures of you on a jet ski, formal review. It could start off as a short form, but then very quickly turn into a full review. So don't think just because you got a short form.
So at this,
yeah.
Sure. So at this point, for instance, they're going to ask me, do you feel like, you are doing better now, right? However they're going to word that. They're referring to the two diagnoses they gave me, not the two diagnoses the three diagnoses I applied for. Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying
so they're referring to whatever they accepted me under?
What I'm saying is they found you disabled under two potential listing level, impairment codes. And as a result of that, they'll use the 8-step sequential process to see whether or not you meet the severity requirements for those. Since you've gotten better, they'll then do another analysis as going down the 8-step sequential process to figure out if those new impairments meet the severity requirement. But, remember, this is a situation where when they do this newer analysis, they tend to use the newer standards of review, which means that the rules have changed significantly to be against you, the claimant. So if you were found disabled, basically going back to the 2015 rules of what your onset date was, the rules back then were very liberal, they allowed a lot of claims, things like that. Going now to 2022 and new standards for your impairments, it's going to be much harder to win that claim. So, remember that even though you put down...
I haven't gotten better, and so that's not my problem or my question. My real thing is when I'm answering like these questions, right? It doesn't matter whatever I said, right? The three diagnoses I put under, it doesn't count. Basically, it's whatever they accepted me under, which is something that I didn't even say.
Okay, so I'll go into it again. They have the ability to dictate what impairments they find in your medical evidence meet the severity requirements.
Okay.
You could write down anything.
Right.
You could write down that
Right.
you basically have this, and this, and they may not say these are the reasons that you were severely impaired. At the end of the day, they look at it this way. There's mild, moderate, severe, and extreme impairments. And they're looking for the easiest way to either find you disabled or get you rejected. The easiest way for somebody to be quick through approved would be to find a really severe, an extreme impairment. That would be a compassion allowance listing. Or a severe impairment. That would be a listing level allowance. Or basically you're older and you have multiple moderate to severe impairments or severe impairments that equate to limitation in working capacity. That would be a grid out. Or basically you can't work at all, right? And that would be, all of your impairments combined. You could have a ton of milds, a ton of moderates, maybe one severe, whatever, but they all equate to an inability to work. And that would be a vocational. So for your thing to say, hey, I put these down, you have to then go by these, that's not how it works. It's never worked that way.
Okay.
It works based on what your doctors say you have been diagnosed with.
Sure. Do you know if there's a big backlog for the CDR due to COVID?
So yes, CDRs are definitely in backlog like any other function. Local field offices are having a really tough time trying to catch up. More people have applied now than ever before, which means that at this point, everything's kind of bumped up around 3 to 5 months. Some areas, like on the west side of Florida, are up to 5 to 9 months just waiting period to go ahead and have a DDS rep assigned. And remember, when you go through this process, they usually get a DDS rep assigned that's going to go collect the evidence, begin the process, send it off to an MCPC for review, and then maybe send you off to medical experts to get CE appointments.
Okay. Thank you so much, attorney, for answering my questions, and thank you for helping so many people.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Have a wonderful, wonderful night.
You too. You have a lovely night as well.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and call this other person real quick. We're going to get them on the phone, and we're going to do a couple of these, and then we'll go ahead and end it for the night because it's obviously a very long show. Let's see if we can get this person on the phone real quick, and then we should be good to go going forward. Here we go, real quick. Let's see. Hi, this is Attorney Walter Knott. We are live on YouTube. Remember to use a fake name. Would you like me to answer a specific question, or would you like me to answer hearing questions?
Pretty much a specific.
Sure, go ahead.
My name is Jim, and I'm currently on SSI. I was wondering, since my disability originally was for my back,
Mhm.
I've since had a couple things come up medically, more that are right in line with my severity of my back disability. One of them being I had to have open heart surgery because of spinal meningitis. It damaged my heart valve, and then I've been 2 years ago. I've been diagnosed with primary progressive multiple sclerosis.
Okay.
So I was wondering if it might behoove me to look into trying out SSDI rather than SSI. I might do better financially that way.
Well, do you have enough quarters of coverage? Because you need 20 quarters of coverage within the past 10 years.
I need what coverage?
Quarters of coverage. The quarters are basically the credits. Do you have enough credit? Like, when was the last time that you stopped working?
About 20 years ago.
Yeah, so you would not be able to go into SSDI benefits because you don't have enough credits or quarters of coverage, and you are allowed to get.
I understand what you're saying now.
Yeah.
The quarters of credits. I know exactly what you're saying.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So one thing you could do is over a 5-year period, go ahead and send into the IRS. This year you earned $6,100, next year $6,200, next year $6,300. Do that for a total of 5 years, and that'll get you enough quarters of coverage where you submit that you had earnings. You pay taxes on that $6,100, $6,200, $6,300. That'll get you your quarters of coverage, and then you can go ahead and apply and get onto Medicare. And then you'll wait your 24-month period to go ahead, plus the 5-month wait period to go ahead and get your Medicare attachment to your SSDI benefits.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Absolutely. But wait, how old are you currently?
I am 59 years old.
So okay, yeah. So I mean, you know what I mean? Like that's what I would say. They're going to force you from SSI over to retirement at 62. So I mean, it's still a wise maneuver to do that because then you could go ahead and transition to SSDI benefits in between that 62 and 67 when you would retire with full retirement.
Mm-hmm.
That would be the wise way to do it. But I'm not sure if you're going to have enough money to say, pay taxes on $62, $63, $6,400 to the IRS to say you have self-earned income.
Right. And how can I work at this point?
Well, it's self-employed. You wouldn't actually be, really, you would just be paying taxes on essentially money, self-employed.
Paying taxes on, okay.
Yeah, I mean, you
so
could.
It's kind of like a ghost deal.
Well, no, I mean, you could still, pick things up, put things down if you wanted to. But the reality is, you're paying taxes to the United States government. They're giving you quarters of coverage as a result of that. You're quasi buying credits.
Okay. Well, I'll look into that. If I can get my rent to go down, if I can get some sort of help with rent, like Section 8 or something like that, because I'm paying full market rent.
Sure.
So I'm trying to get on. I'm on the list, the waiting list. But how the waiting lists for housing are just screaming because rents are going nuts. And here in Utah, I'm from California, and Utah, the rents have gone up 70% in just the 2 years that I've been here. So
wow.
I don't, here I moved to a place that doesn't have fires or earthquake, and they have fires and earthquake. And then right away when I got here, there was an earthquake, and shortly thereafter a fire. And then the rents have gone nuts, and I'm looking at paying $1,100 for a studio apartment. It's just crazy. So that's.
Yeah, I have a video coming out about specifically steps that you take that are, beyond just the traditional Section 8 Florida Housing Code allowances and stuff like that to basically find housing that's cheap. But the options are not great because everything that's off the traditional path is all private. And this problem
Sure.
with the private stuff is that they can make it as expensive as they want, as fast as they want,
Right.
So, yeah, I mean,
Worked either way.
yeah, and that's the other thing too. A lot of people don't realize this whole 5.9% increase in cola is a very tiny itty bitty joke compared to the actual increase of 7 to 8% now. And then there's some things that are double digits. And kind of the problem with this is that when you talk
That would
about
be
rent,
nice.
well, but, no, but that's you don't get paid that. They just increase it. You only got 5.9% increase,
Right.
which means that you actually lost significantly amounts of money to pay for things that just cost significantly more. So
Right.
the reality of this situation is that people don't realize that, and I made a video about it. I said, are the SSI people going to become the new homeless generation? And to some degree they are. And that's because, and people always scream, well, there's programs and they only have to pay a percentage of what they get from the government to be able to stay there. Yes, but those programs are way too small to support massive needs for housing, which is exactly where we're going with
Yes.
this. So, it's one of those
Yeah,
things.
huge, long waiting lists.
Yeah.
3 years. I'm on a waiting list that's about 3 years long.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
that's with being disabled and everything. All the considerations and everything. It doesn't make any difference. But the waiting list is about 3 years long, and that's in Utah. And I didn't think it would be that big of a deal, and it's a big deal. Housing is just a big deal everywhere. And as much as I saw homeless people in California, I see them not as much, but I see them here as well. And I was thinking I'd never see a homeless person, and sure enough, I was wrong. It's amazing.
The truth of the matter is, if we had mass housing built, we're talking massive warehouses that are just filled with apartments, we could essentially fix the housing crisis. We could fix the crisis, in a relatively short period of time. If you were to go ahead and take large areas of land and build basically massive warehouses with apartments built into them, people would be housed. And, obviously you would have to control drug and narcotic issues. You'd have to control, basically
Sure.
violence and stuff like that. But it could be done. What a lot of people don't realize is that, at the end of the day, this is never done because they're always trying to play the game of fixing it without fixing it. It's the exact same way our big pharma industry works. They'll give us something that will take the pain away for a moment, but we'll never be cured of it.
Yeah, I'm on that that program right now. Yeah. No, I understand completely. It's just horrible out there as far as housing is concerned. To try and find anything cheaper than what I'm getting now is just, I can't find anything. If it is, it's unacceptable. You know what I mean? The housing is just not, up to. I mean, saying that it's not up to par is a mild way to put it, because it's just just not where where you'd want to live.
Right.
So the place I live in is clean and is a nice apartment, but it's a studio, and it's they're going up to $1,100 on them. And that's a lot for Utah. I mean, in California, everything is that price. So in the blink of an eye, you know what that you're going to pay if you live in California. But this is not California.
Well, California.
California.
I mean, it'd be $2,500. It'd be, you'd be at a totally different price.
I know.
Yeah.
For what I'm paying, what I'm getting now, I would guesstimate $18,000 to $2,000 for what I'm living in right now.
Yeah.
In California, but that's one of the reasons why I moved from California. One of the reasons. Family was another one, and there were other concerns, but one of the prime concern was housing. The housing was so much cheaper, and it's not so much cheaper. Unfortunately, I moved here, and I was paying more than I'm getting right now. But it's like you do what you have to.
Yeah.
Do what you gotta.
Well, good sir. I will catch you a little bit later. I'm going to take one more phone call after this, but you have a wonderful, wonderful night, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Knott. I really appreciate your assistance in this matter.
Absolutely, sir. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you. You as well. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So, guys, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and leave the phone open for just a moment. I'm going to put the phone number there. Whoever wants to call in. I know a lot of people called, but if anybody's still with us, they can go ahead and call in. I know this went way past the usual time. It's at 10:30 right now, so I totally get that. I see Sweetie coming over, which means she needs cuddles and stat. I mean, she is just looking at me with that chubby little smile on her face. Yep, you can hear her. She's a chubby dog. What we may do is basically end it right here. I know people are tired. It is super duper late. I wanted to say to you guys, thank you so much for being a part of this channel. Also, if you do recognize somebody's voice or you do know somebody who's giving testimony or statements on this channel, always don't put their name in the comment section. I always appreciate that. Keep anonymity, keep them anonymous. And with that said, we are likely over the next couple of weeks to have some other individuals giving testimony and things like that. Some of them are actually quasi-celebrities. So one of the cool things about this channel is that it's opened up people who are having disability-related issues that are actually, to some degree, famous for other things. So hopefully we'll be able to get them to join us on the channel and keep pushing things forward. You have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful night, everybody. Thank you so much for chilling out with us on this beautiful Thursday night. I will catch you a little bit later, and let's keep getting the truth out there and keep just doing what we do and basically teaching each other about how things work. Tutorials, YouTube is an amazing, amazing thing for that. Let's keep rocking it. Let's keep using it for what it is useful for. All right. I'll catch you a little bit later. Thank you so much, guys. Have a wonderful night. Bye-bye.